The night had swallowed the forest whole. Snow fell in heavy, silent sheets, erasing every trail, every trace of life, except for the small, motionless figure half buried beneath a frozen log. His name was Liam, and he had stopped crying hours ago. The wind had taken his voice, the frost his strength. He was only 12, but in the brutal wilderness of Montana's northern ridge, that meant he was already halfway to dying. His parents' car had skidded off the icy road at dusk. The crash echoed for miles, but no one came. Now the world was quiet, except for the low, rhythmic growl of something unseen moving between the trees. Through the snowstorm, 2 yellow eyes appeared, glinting like dying embers. A wolf, large, grey and starving, emerged from the dark. Its ribs pressed against its skin, and steam rose from its breath like smoke. It circled the boy slowly, drawn by the faint scent of blood. In that moment, nature stood on a knife's edge. Life and death, predator and prey, both frozen in the same silence. Then the wolf did something no one would ever believe. Instead of attacking, it lay down beside the child, pressing its body against him to share its heat. Beneath the storm, the orphan and the beast formed a fragile thread of life, 2 broken souls, breathing as one. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. It helps us bring you more true and emotional stories from the wild. Stories that remind us that compassion can still exist, even in the most unlikely places. What happened that night would change everything. Because when the morning came, the boy was still alive, and the wolf was still there, watching over him from the shadows. The snowstorm had raged through the night like an angry sea, swallowing everything in its path. When dawn finally crept over the mountains, it brought no warmth, only a pale, merciless light that revealed what was left behind. The wreck of the car lay at the edge of a frozen ravine, its metal twisted and half covered in white. Inside, silence. The world had moved on, but 50 yards away, a faint rise and fall disturbed the snow. The slow, shallow breaths of a boy who shouldn't have survived. Liam stirred, his lips cracked and blue, his eyelashes frozen together. For a moment he didn't remember where he was. The world was just light and cold and pain. Then he saw it, the wolf lying beside him, its fur dusted with frost, chest moving slowly, steaming breath rising in the air. He froze, unsure if he was dreaming or about to die. The creature's head lifted slightly, and 2 golden eyes locked onto his. They weren't wild or furious. They were ancient, as if the forest itself was looking at him. When Liam tried to move, his limbs refused. His fingers were stiff, and he could barely feel his legs. The wolf tilted its head, watching. Then it stood, stretching slowly, its muscles rippling under thick fur. It took a single step toward him, deliberate, calm, and then another. Liam's heart pounded so hard, he thought the sound might shatter the silence. The wolf lowered its head and nudged his shoulder with its nose. A warm puff of air brushed his cheek. He flinched but didn't scream. The animal stepped over him, circled once and lay down again, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from its body. For a long time, neither moved. The boy just listened, to the slow beat of the animal's heart, to the distant creak of trees bending under ice. He thought of his mother's voice calling his name just before the crash, the way her hand had reached toward him as the world spun. He wanted to cry, but his tears froze before they could fall. So instead he whispered, barely audible, "You're not gonna hurt me, right?" The wolf didn't respond, of course. But something in the way it blinked, unhurried, steady, made Liam believe it understood. Hours passed. The sun crawled higher, then disappeared again behind clouds. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, and the pain in his legs sharpened until every breath felt like glass, cutting through his chest. The wolf stood suddenly, ears twitching, its head turned toward the woods. Liam followed its gaze. Nothing but endless white and drifting snow. But the animal's body stiffened. It heard something he couldn't. Then it disappeared into the forest without a sound. Panic filled him instantly. "Wait, don't go!" His voice cracked. The wind swallowed it. He didn't know why, but the thought of being alone again terrified him more than death. He waited, minutes, maybe hours, until finally movement stirred between the trees. The wolf returned, dragging something dark in its jaws. It was a dead rabbit, limp and frozen. The animal dropped it beside him and looked up as if expecting him to understand. Liam stared, wide-eyed. The message was clear: food, survival. The wolf sat, panting softly, waiting. His stomach twisted. He couldn't eat it raw. But the wolf lowered its head again, tearing into the flesh, then nudged a piece toward him. The sight made his stomach churn, but he was too weak to argue. He took a trembling bite. The taste of blood filled his mouth, metallic and wrong. But life returned, one painful heartbeat at a time. That night, they huddled together again beneath the broken pine branches. The storm had passed, leaving the world eerily still. Liam pressed his face into the wolf's fur, breathing in its scent, a mix of earth, snow, and wildness. He whispered into the darkness, "You saved me." The wolf didn't move, but its ear twitched, and for the first time since the crash, Liam felt something that wasn't fear. It was small, fragile, like hope trying to thaw in the cold. Days blurred together. The wolf hunted. Liam followed as best he could, limping through the snow. They found shelter in an abandoned ranger's cabin, its roof half collapsed, but enough to block the wind. He named the wolf Ash, for the color of his fur, and the way he seemed born from the fire of the wild itself. Each night, Liam spoke softly to him. "I think you were alone too, huh?" he'd say. "Maybe that's why you found me." Sometimes the wolf would tilt his head or rest his chin on his paws, and in those moments, it almost felt like an answer. But the forest wasn't safe. One evening, as the sun bled red over the horizon, Ash tensed. His nose lifted to the wind, hackles rising. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Liam froze, listening, and then he heard it too. Voices, human voices, faint but real. At first, relief washed over him. People, rescue. But then came the sound of engines and laughter, not kind, not hopeful. Hunters. Ash growled louder, standing between Liam and the noise. The boy crouched beside him, whispering, "They'll help us." But deep down, something told him otherwise. The wolf's instincts were screaming danger. The smell of gasoline and gunpowder drifted through the cold. Liam looked at Ash, then toward the darkening trees, his pulse racing. When the first distant gunshot cracked the air, the wolf shoved him backward into the snow. Liam gasped. Another shot echoed, closer. Ash snarled and sprinted toward the sound, vanishing into the shadows. Liam screamed after him, "Ash, no!" But the forest swallowed his voice. The last thing he saw before night fell again was a flash of grey fur disappearing between the trees, and the terrifying realization that the only creature that had ever protected him was now running straight into danger. The echo of the gunshot lingered like thunder trapped beneath the trees. Liam crouched behind a fallen trunk, his heart pounding so hard he thought the hunters would hear it. Snowflakes drifted down, landing softly on his face, melting into cold streaks that ran down his cheeks like tears. He wanted to run after Ash, to scream his name, but he knew it would be useless, or worse, fatal. The forest was no longer silent. It breathed danger now. He waited, holding his breath, listening. Then came the voices, rough, loud, echoing through the pines. "Did you see that? Looked like a big one, grey, maybe over 100 pounds. One man shouted. Another laughed. "Biggest pelt we'll get all season. Worth a fortune if we bring it in clean." Liam's stomach twisted. They were talking about Ash. He pressed his back against the cold bark, forcing himself to stay still. The hunter's boots crunched through the snow somewhere ahead, and he could see faint beams of light slicing through the fog. Flashlights. They were close. For a moment, a thought flickered in his mind. He could call out, tell them he was alive, beg them to help. But then he remembered the way Ash had looked at them. Ears flat, teeth bared, the growl deep and low. That was no instinct of fear, it was recognition. The wolf had seen men like these before. And he had learned not to trust them. Liam waited until the voices faded into the distance. His hands were shaking as he pushed himself up. The snow was knee-deep, every step slow and painful, but he started moving in the direction Ash had gone. His breath came out in harsh clouds as he stumbled through the forest, following the faint tracks in the snow, paw prints, sharp and clear. The wolf was running fast. He didn't stop until the sun began to sink behind the mountains. The air grew colder, and the world turned blue. His fingers had gone numb again, but the thought of Ash kept him moving. Then ahead he saw something: blood. Small drops at first, scattered on the snow, then streaks dragging marks. His chest tightened. Ash! The trail led him to a clearing where the pines thinned, revealing a frozen stream. On the other side, Ash stood, panting, his flank streaked with red. The wolf's fur was torn along his shoulder, but his eyes were bright, burning with life. When he saw Liam, he froze, surprised. Then instead of retreating, he limped toward him, crossing the ice carefully. "You're hurt," Liam whispered as Ash reached him. The wolf stood close, breathing heavily, his warm breath mixing with the boy's cold air. Liam reached out slowly, touching the edge of the wound. Ash flinched but didn't pull away. "We need to get you back to the cabin," Liam said softly, though he had no idea how he'd manage it. Then a sound ripped through the woods. A whistle, sharp and deliberate. The hunters! Ash's head snapped up, ears twitching. Liam grabbed a branch and waved it frantically through the snow, erasing their tracks. "Come on, boy," he murmured, his voice trembling. "We have to go." They moved together, half running, half stumbling, until they reached the base of a rocky slope. There, beneath a ridge of stone, was a narrow cave hidden by fallen branches. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Liam crawled inside first, then turned to see Ash collapse beside him, his breath ragged. Blood darkened the snow beneath his side. Liam ripped a piece of fabric from his torn jacket and pressed it gently against the wound. "Hold on," he whispered. "You saved me, now it's my turn." He had no medicine, no fire, nothing but desperation. But he stayed there through the night, pressing the cloth, whispering stories to keep himself awake, stories about his mom's favorite songs, about the way his dad used to drive him to school. He didn't know if Ash understood, but somehow the words made the cold hurt less. When dawn came, the forest glowed silver. The boy's eyes were heavy, but Ash was still breathing. The bleeding had slowed. Liam leaned back, exhausted, letting out a shaky laugh. "See? Told you I'd fix it." The sound of footsteps froze him mid-breath. Voices again, closer this time. "Tracks lead up here," someone shouted. "I saw blood. That wolf's dying somewhere near." Liam's blood turned to ice. The cave was small, too shallow to hide them both. He looked at Ash, then at the entrance. The wolf's eyes met his, calm, knowing. He understood the danger. Ash rose weakly, nudging Liam with his head toward the back of the cave, where the rock narrowed to a small crevice barely big enough for a child. Liam shook his head. "No, I'm not leaving you." But the wolf nudged him again, harder this time, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Tears burned Liam's eyes as he crawled backward into the crevice, pressing himself against the cold stone. From there he could just see the entrance, and Ash standing tall in the snow, wounded but unbroken. The first hunter appeared moments later, rifle raised. "There you are," he said with a grin. Ash growled, fur bristling, tail low. The man aimed. "No!" Liam screamed, his voice echoing through the rocks. The shot rang out like thunder. Snow exploded around the wolf. But when it cleared, Ash was gone, vanished into the trees like a ghost. The hunter cursed and ran after him, his footsteps fading into the distance. Liam stayed where he was, shaking uncontrollably, his throat raw from shouting. Then slowly, silence returned. Only the whisper of wind remained. He crawled out of the crevice, his breath shallow. The forest was empty again. No hunters, no wolf, just the endless stretch of snow. He stumbled forward, calling softly, "Ash, please." There was no answer. But near the edge of the woods, beneath a birch tree, he found a single paw print, large, deep, pressed into the snow. Beside it another smaller print. His own. He knelt beside them, whispering into the cold air, "I'll find you. I promise." Above him a single grey feather drifted from the sky, carried by the wind, and though he didn't know why, Liam smiled. Somewhere out there the wolf was still alive, and the boy who had once been left to die in the cold was no longer afraid.
For 3 endless days, Liam wandered the frozen wilderness with nothing but the echo of a howl guiding him. The sound came and went, sometimes near, sometimes faint as a ghost. But each time it broke through the silence, something in his chest pulled him forward. He didn't know where he was going, only that Ash was still out there somewhere. The snow had hardened under his boots, crunching like thin glass. His clothes were torn and stiff with ice, his lips cracked, his hands bleeding from climbing rocks and grabbing frozen branches. The food he'd scavenged, a few pine nuts, melted snow, the occasional scrap left from the wolf's hunts, was almost gone. But giving up wasn't an option. He owed Ash his life, and he would repay it even if it killed him. By the 3rd morning, the sky turned from gray to a pale silver. A thin mist hung over the trees like smoke. Liam's legs ached, but when he saw the trail of paw prints again, his heart leapt. They were fresh, clearer than before. He crouched down and touched the snow where Ash had passed. It was still warm, faintly melted at the center. "Good boy," he whispered, as if the wolf could hear him. "I'm close." The forest ahead opened into a valley, cradled by tall pines and cliffs streaked with ice. At its center, a frozen river glimmered under the sun, winding like a silver vein through the earth. But the beauty of it didn't last. Near the edge of the river, tracks overlapped, not just paw prints. Human footprints. Heavy boots. Liam's stomach dropped. He followed them cautiously, moving from tree to tree. Then he saw the smoke, a thin column rising between the rocks. He crept closer and saw the hunters' camp, 2 tents, a fire, and the men who had shot at Ash. They were laughing, drinking from metal flasks, rifles leaning against a log. Beside the fire, hung from a branch, was something that made Liam's blood run cold. A wolf trap, open and waiting, its metal teeth glinting in the light. They were planning to finish the job. He pressed his hand against his mouth to stop himself from making a sound. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might give him away. Then, faintly behind the camp, he heard a whimper, low, pained. Liam's breath caught. He followed the sound through the brush until he saw it. Ash, lying in a shallow pit covered with broken branches. A chain wrapped around his leg, clamped tight in the jaws of another trap. Blood stained the snow beneath him. "Ash," Liam's voice cracked. He scrambled toward him, dropping to his knees. The wolf's eyes fluttered open. When he saw Liam, he made a weak growl, not of anger, but of warning. The boy shook his head. No, it's me. I'm here." He tugged at the trap, trying to pry the metal apart, but it wouldn't budge. His fingers slipped, and blood smeared across the steel. Ash whimpered again, his breathing shallow. Liam wiped his eyes, shaking. "I'll get you out. I swear." A shout erupted behind him. "Hey!" Liam turned just as one of the hunters stepped from the trees, rifle raised. "What the hell?" He didn't think. He just ran. The man fired. The shot cracked the air and sent snow exploding beside him. Liam dove behind a log, clutching his chest, the sound of footsteps thundering closer. "Get back here, kid," the hunter yelled. But Liam didn't stop. He sprinted toward the river, slipping on the ice, falling, scrambling up again. The man chased after him, boots pounding. Then suddenly, a second howl split the air, deeper, angrier, closer. The hunter froze. Out of the trees, 3 shapes emerged, wolves. Wild ones, their fur dark and thick, eyes gleaming in the pale light. They circled the camp like shadows, snarling. The man cursed, backing away. "What in?" And then came another sound, the clinking of the chain. Ash, limping but furious, had pulled himself free. The trap dangled from his leg, but he stood tall, teeth bared. Liam stared, breathless, as Ash stepped between him and the hunter. The man raised his gun again, but before he could fire, one of the other wolves lunged. The rifle went flying into the snow. Chaos erupted, snarls, shouting, the hiss of fire as it scattered. The hunters fled toward the trees, their shouts fading into the distance. The pack didn't chase. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, their eyes turning to Ash, as if waiting for him to decide what came next. Ash limped toward Liam, collapsing beside him. The boy fell to his knees, pressing his hands against the wolf's fur. "You did it," he whispered, voice shaking. "You're alive." Ash's breath came out in short bursts, but his eyes softened. The pack began to disappear one by one into the forest, melting into the mist. Only Ash stayed. Liam tore a strip from his jacket and wrapped it around the bleeding leg, tightening it carefully. "It's okay now," he murmured. "They're gone." When he was done, Ash lowered his head into the boy's lap. Liam stroked his fur gently. "We're going home." But he didn't know what home meant anymore. By sunset, the forest had fallen quiet again. Liam and Ash made their way back toward the mountains, following the faint glow of light reflecting off the snow. The boy's hands were numb, his body trembling from exhaustion. Yet the warmth that came from the wolf beside him kept him moving. They reached the ranger cabin again by nightfall. It was colder now, the wind howling through broken windows. Liam found old firewood under a bench, damp but usable. He struck sparks with a piece of metal until a small flame caught. The light flickered over the room, over the cracked walls, the frost, and the wolf lying beside him. For the first time since the crash, the boy felt safe. He stared at the fire, whispering softly, "You could have killed me that night. But you didn't. You stayed." Ash blinked slowly, his golden eyes reflecting the flames. Liam smiled faintly. "I think maybe we're the same. Both just trying to survive." He leaned back against the wall, exhaustion finally pulling him under. The last thing he saw before sleep claimed him was Ash lifting his head, watching the door as if guarding his dreams. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle this time, soft as feathers. The forest, which had once seemed endless and cruel, now felt alive, a silent witness to a bond that had defied nature itself. And far in the distance, unseen by either boy or wolf, a new danger was already moving through the valley, one that would test their trust in a way neither of them could imagine. When Liam woke the next morning, the air inside the ranger's cabin was thin and smoky. The fire had burned low to glowing embers, filling the space with an orange haze. His back ached from sleeping against the wall, and his stomach growled, empty again. Outside, the wind had changed. It no longer howled but whispered, carrying with it the distant smell of something he couldn't place. Ash was already awake, lying near the doorway. His wound looked cleaner, though his leg trembled when he stood. Liam noticed the wolf staring out into the trees, his ears twitching. The boy followed his gaze, but all he saw was fog and frost. "What is it?" he murmured, rubbing his tired eyes. The wolf didn't move. Then Liam smelled it too. Not from their fire, heavier, thicker, sharp with the scent of burning pine. He stumbled to his feet and pushed open the cabin door. A gray cloud rose over the treetops in the distance. It wasn't mist this time. It was fire, a forest fire spreading fast through the frozen valley, fanned by the dry wind. The hunters must have done it. Maybe by accident, maybe not. Either way, it was coming straight for them. Panic clenched his chest. "We have to go," he said, grabbing his backpack, a torn bag filled with scraps, rope, and a half-empty water bottle. He turned toward Ash. "Come on, boy." The wolf hesitated for only a second before limping after him. Together they ran through the trees, snow crunching under their feet, the air growing hotter with every breath. The fire's glow painted the sky orange and gold. Sparks drifted like glowing insects, landing on branches that hissed and smoked. Liam's lungs burned. His legs screamed. But behind him came a worse sound, the faint crack of engines. He turned and saw the hunter's truck emerging through the haze, headlights cutting through smoke. They weren't running from the fire. They were chasing something. "Go, run," he shouted, pushing the wolf forward. They darted through the trees, weaving between trunks, the truck growling closer. The forest was chaos now, animals fleeing, birds erupting into the air, flames crawling from root to branch. A tree fell nearby with a violent crack, sending sparks into the snow. Liam tripped, rolling hard into the ice. The world spun. When he lifted his head, the truck had stopped. Two men jumped out, rifles in hand. "There," one yelled. "The kid's still alive." Liam scrambled backward, eyes wide. "Please, I'm not." But they weren't listening. One of them aimed at Ash, who had turned, growling low, standing between Liam and the men. "Don't shoot!" Liam screamed, throwing himself in front of the wolf. "He saved me. Please." The man hesitated, lowering the gun slightly. The other shouted, "Forget the wolf. The fire's spreading." A burst of wind cut him off, blowing hot ash into their faces. Flames raced up the nearby trees. The forest roared like a furnace. One hunter turned and ran for the truck. The others stumbled after him, coughing. Within seconds, the fire swallowed their voices. Liam grabbed Ash's fur. "We have to move now." They ran downhill, away from the blaze, the heat licking their backs. Every breath felt like fire in his lungs. The snow beneath them had turned to slush, steaming. Ash stayed beside him despite the pain in his leg, pushing him forward each time he faltered. Finally, the ground leveled out. Ahead, through the smoke, a river glimmered, half-frozen, wide and swift. Salvation or death? Liam hesitated at the edge, staring at the icy water. It looked lethal. But behind them, the forest exploded in flame. They had no choice. He turned to Ash. "We have to cross." The wolf's fur was blackened with soot, his golden eyes gleaming with determination. Liam stepped into the river. The shock of cold nearly stopped his heart. He gasped, teeth chattering, forcing himself forward. The current pulled hard, dragging at his legs. "Come on, Ash," he cried. The wolf jumped in, swimming powerfully beside him. Together they fought the current, inch by inch. Liam's arms were numb. His boots felt like weights. Just as his strength began to fail, a chunk of ice broke free upstream, spinning toward them. It slammed into his side, knocking him under. The world went dark, icy, silent, endless. His chest burned. He kicked, reaching for light, for air, but his limbs moved like stone. Then something grabbed his jacket, teeth, firm and unyielding. He felt himself being pulled. A rush of air hit his face as they broke the surface. He coughed violently, choking, gasping for breath. Through the blur of water and smoke, he saw Ash dragging him toward the shore, muscles trembling with effort. They collapsed together on the opposite bank, coughing, shaking, alive. The fire raged behind them, devouring the valley. The sky glowed red, and the wind screamed like a wounded beast. But on their side of the river, the forest still stood, cold, black, and silent. Liam lay there, shivering uncontrollably. He reached for Ash, pressing his hand against the wolf's wet fur. "You saved me again," he whispered through chattering teeth. "I don't know how you keep doing that." Ash rested his head beside the boys, breathing heavily. His wound bled again, the bandage long gone. The wolf's strength was fading. Liam sat up, panic flaring. "No, not now. Please." He tore off his soaked jacket and pressed it against the wound, crying out as the wolf whimpered. "Stay with me. You're not leaving me, you hear?" Hours passed before the fire finally died. The night returned, black and cold, littered with falling ash. Liam built a small fire with whatever dry branches he could find. He leaned against the wolf, his clothes steaming in the heat. Neither of them slept. Sometime after midnight, a sound rose from the hills, faint, distant howls echoing through the valley. Ash lifted his head weakly. His ears twitched, eyes half closed. Liam stared into the darkness. "Your pack?" he murmured. "They're calling you." The wolf didn't move. He just lay there, breathing slow and shallow. Tears blurred Liam's vision. "You can go," he whispered. "You don't have to stay because of me." But Ash didn't move away. Instead, he pressed closer, resting his head against Liam's chest. The boy's arms wrapped around him, holding tight as the fire flickered low. The valley was silent except for the crackle of flames and the distant howling, one calling for the other, across the vast, burned wilderness. And in that moment, Liam understood something that would never leave him. Even in a world as cruel as this, love, wild, wordless, and real, could still burn brighter than fire. The dawn that followed was silent, gray, and heavy. A thin veil of ash floated through the air, settling over the charred forest like black snow. The fire had devoured everything in its path: the trees, the hunter's camp, even the distant cabin that had once felt like safety. Liam sat beside the river, his arms wrapped around his knees, staring blankly at the smoke still curling from the ground. Beside him, Ash lay motionless except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. The wolf's breathing was shallow, every inhale a quiet struggle. The wound on his leg had reopened during the night, and his once silver fur was streaked with dried blood. Liam had tried to clean it with river water, but it wasn't enough. He could feel the tremor in Ash's body every time the cold wind touched him. "We need help," Liam whispered. His voice sounded strange in the emptiness, too small for the endless wilderness. "If we don't find someone soon," he stopped, unable to finish. He looked across the river toward the blackened valley. The world seemed dead. No birds, no sound, just the quiet hiss of cooling earth. Then, faintly, a noise rose through the silence. A howl. Liam's head snapped up. It came from deep in the north, long and low, rolling through the forest like a distant call. Another answered it, then another. It wasn't just one wolf. It was a pack. Ash's pack. The injured wolf's ears twitched, and he tried to lift his head, but his strength gave out halfway. Liam placed a gentle hand on his fur. "They're coming for you," he said softly. "You hear that? They're looking for you." He hesitated. Part of him wanted to stay, to wait here and hope. But he knew the truth: the pack might not reach them in time. The smoke would mask their scent, and Ash could barely move. Liam bit his lip and glanced downriver. "If we follow the stream," he murmured, "maybe there's a town, maybe someone who can help." The thought of people filled him with both hope and fear. What if they took Ash away? What if they saw a wolf and only thought of danger? Still, he couldn't just let him die. He tore strips from his shirt, wrapped them around the wolf's leg again, and whispered, "I'm gonna get you there. I promise." Then he started walking, slowly, painfully, following the frozen river's curve. Ash limped beside him, his steps uneven but determined. The smoke thickened at times, forcing them to stop and catch their breath, but the boy refused to turn back. The only direction left was forward. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, glowing weakly through the haze. Liam's feet ached, his stomach hollow from hunger. But each time he faltered, he felt Ash's presence beside him, steady, loyal, unbreakable. The wolf didn't lead now. He followed, trusting the boy the way the boy had once trusted him. By afternoon, the snow returned, soft flakes falling through the ruined sky. The fire had burned everything except the mountains, which loomed ahead like dark guardians. At their base, Liam saw something glinting, metal. His pulse quickened. He ran toward it, slipping on the ice, until the shape took form. A signpost. Rusted, half-buried, but readable. Forest Service outpost, 3 miles north. He turned to Ash with a trembling smile. "We made it." But the wolf didn't move. He stood still, ears perked, nose lifted to the wind. Liam frowned. "What is it?" Then he heard it too: engines. Not trucks this time. Snowmobiles. The sound was distant but growing. He hid behind a fallen log, peering through the branches. 2 figures emerged through the haze, dressed in bright orange park ranger jackets. They stopped near the river, scanning the burned valley. One of them lifted a radio. "Copy that. We found tracks. Looks like a survivor." Relief crashed over Liam so hard he almost cried. He turned to Ash. "We're saved," he whispered. "They'll help us." But the wolf's body tensed. His eyes locked on the rangers. He didn't understand. To him, all humans smelled the same: smoke, metal, danger. He backed away, growling softly. "No, Ash, it's okay," Liam said, stepping closer. "They're not like the hunters. They'll take us somewhere safe." He took one cautious step toward the clearing, raising his hands. "Hey, over here," he shouted. The rangers' heads snapped up. "There's a kid," one yelled, running toward him. Ash snarled, moving between them and the boy. The men froze. "Careful," one said. "He's got a wolf with him." "It's okay," Liam cried. "He's not dangerous." The wolf lowered his stance, unsure. The smell of oil and metal filled the air, awakening every instinct to flee or fight. The rangers inched closer. One lifted a tranquilizer rifle. "Don't move, kid. We'll take care of the animal." "No!" Liam shouted. "He saved my life." The ranger hesitated, glancing at his partner. "We can't take risks." Ash growled louder, and the sound shattered whatever calm remained. The ranger fired. The dart missed by inches, hissing into the snow. The wolf bolted into the trees. "Ash!" Liam screamed, breaking free from the man's grasp. He ran after the wolf, ignoring the ranger's calls. Branches whipped against his face, his lungs burning. "Come back!" He followed the trail through the pines until he saw the wolf at the edge of a cliff, staring out over the valley. The snow fell heavier now, swirling around them in a quiet storm. Liam slowed, gasping for air. "You can't run," he pleaded. "You'll die out here." Ash turned his head. Their eyes met, golden against gray sky. In that gaze, Liam saw everything: fear, freedom, loyalty. The wolf limped forward, pressing his nose gently against the boy's chest. For a moment, it felt like a goodbye. "No," Liam whispered, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Don't you dare." A shout echoed behind him, the rangers catching up. Ash stepped back. Liam lunged, grabbing the wolf's fur, but his fingers slipped. The ground beneath them gave way, a brittle ledge cracking under their weight. Snow and rock collapsed. They fell. The world spun in white and gray, air rushing past like a scream. But everything went silent. When Liam opened his eyes, he was lying on a slope halfway down the ravine. Pain surged through his side. He tried to move, calling hoarsely, "Ash?" No answer. Only the soft whisper of snow settling around him. He crawled forward, every movement agony, until he saw a patch of fur beneath a broken pine. The wolf lay still, half buried, the dart still in his flank. Liam reached him, shaking, his voice breaking. "No, no, please wake up." Ash's eyes fluttered open weakly. His gaze found Liam one last time. And then, with a breath that steamed in the cold, he went still. The boy's cry echoed through the valley, a raw, hollow sound that carried farther than any howl. High above, the wind answered, a low mournful note moving through the mountains. And though the wolf was gone, his spirit lingered in that sound, an echo of loyalty that would never fade. Liam pressed his forehead to Ash's fur and whispered through his tears, "You were never just a wolf, you were my family." The snow didn't stop falling that night. It came down in thick, endless waves, burying the ravine in silence. Liam sat motionless beside Ash's still body, numb to everything: the cold, the pain, the shouting voices that echoed faintly from above. Time didn't exist anymore. Only the quiet weight of loss, pressing heavy on his chest. When the rangers finally reached him, their orange jackets glowing through the storm, they found a boy covered in frost, his hands gripping a lifeless wolf. One of them crouched beside him. "Hey, kid," he said gently. "We've got you. You're safe now." But Liam didn't look up. His voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. "He's not breathing." The ranger hesitated, then placed a hand on the wolf's fur. "Cold. No pulse." "I'm sorry," he murmured. "We can't do anything for him now." Liam shook his head. "He saved me. He saved me again and again." His lips trembled, but no tears came. They had frozen long ago. The older ranger looked at him quietly. "Let's get you out of here before you freeze too." He motioned to his partner. They wrapped Liam in a heavy thermal blanket, lifted him from the ground, and carried him up the ravine. The snow creaked under their boots. Behind them, they left a mound where Ash lay, a dark shape slowly vanishing beneath the white. At the top, a snowmobile waited. Liam sat silently as they started the engine. The world blurred past in streaks of gray and white, the trees melting into ghosts. He couldn't stop replaying it, the look in Ash's eyes before the end. That silent promise. When they reached the outpost, The medics rushed him inside. The warmth was unbearable at first, almost painful after the cold. Someone spoke about hypothermia, dehydration, shock. They gave him soup, wrapped him in blankets, asked questions about the accident, the hunters, how long he'd been alone. He answered none of them. He just stared at the fire crackling in the small stove. The next day, a social worker from the nearby town arrived. A woman named Ellen, kind but careful. She sat across from him with a clipboard and soft eyes. "Liam," she said gently, "you're very lucky to be alive. You were missing for 8 days." He didn't answer. "I know you're scared," she continued, "but you're safe now. You'll come with me for a while until we find your relatives." He nodded slowly, though he wasn't really listening. The word felt empty. The only place he'd felt safe was beside Ash, in the snow, in the silence, in the wild. Over the next week, the world returned to order. News reports called it the miracle boy of the Northern Ridge. People wanted interviews, photos, explanations. But Liam refused to speak about the wolf. When asked how he'd survived, he simply said, "Someone watched over me." Days turned to weeks. He was placed with a foster family in the small town of Coldwater, where the mountains still loomed on the horizon. They were kind, a quiet couple who gave him space. The man, Mr. Cooper, ran the town's small supply store. His wife, a teacher, tried to fill the silence around him with warmth. But Liam stayed distant, his mind always back in the forest. Each night, he dreamed of the snow, of yellow eyes watching from the trees, of fur brushing against his cheek, of a low, steady heartbeat beside him. Some nights he woke up gasping, his chest tight. Other nights he would stare out the window for hours, waiting to hear that distant howl again. One morning, about a month after his rescue, Ellen came to visit. "They found the crash site," she said softly. "Your parents, they didn't make it. But they found this." She handed him a small, dented locket. Inside was a picture of his family, his mother's smile, his father's arm around his shoulders. It should have made him cry. But instead, he just closed it quietly and whispered, "Thank you." That afternoon, Liam walked to the edge of town where the snow still covered the ground in smooth waves. The forest began there, stretching endlessly into the distance. He stood for a long time, staring into the trees. And then he heard it, faint, almost hidden by the wind. A howl. Low, haunting, beautiful. His breath caught. Ash. He ran toward the sound, heart racing. The trees swallowed him, branches heavy with frost. The howling came again, closer this time. When he reached the clearing by the frozen stream, he stopped. There, standing at the edge of the woods, was a wolf. Gray fur, golden eyes. Larger than before, stronger, wilder. But when it saw him, it didn't move. It just stood there watching. Liam's heart pounded. "It can't be," he whispered. The wolf tilted its head slightly, as if recognizing him. Then it howled once more, not a cry of pain, but of life. Another wolf appeared beside it, then two more, a small pack. They stood together, proud and silent. Tears filled Liam's eyes. He took a step forward, but the wolf turned and began to walk away, disappearing into the trees. He didn't chase it. He knew what it meant. Some bonds didn't need words, or even presence, to endure. When he returned to town, Ellen was waiting by her car. "You okay?" she asked. Liam smiled faintly for the first time. "Yeah," he said. "I just needed to say goodbye." That night, as snow began to fall again over Coldwater, Liam sat by the window and whispered into the quiet, "I'll never forget you." And deep in the forest, under a canopy of ice and moonlight, a single gray wolf lifted his head and howled toward the stars. It was not a cry of grief, but of remembrance, a promise carried by the wind. Years later, people would still talk about the boy who survived the mountain fire, about courage, fate, and miracles. But Liam knew the truth. He hadn't survived because he was strong. He had survived because something wild and selfless had chosen to love him. He grew up to work as a forest ranger, patrolling the same ridges where he'd once been lost. And every winter, when the snow began to fall, he'd stop by that same frozen stream, the place where a wolf had once laid beside him and shared its warmth. Sometimes, on those nights, when the wind was just right, he'd still hear it, the soft echo of a howl drifting through the valley. And though no one else ever believed him, he always smiled, whispering into the cold, "I kept my promise, Ash. I never forgot." The snow would keep falling. The mountains would remain. And somewhere in the wild, the bond between a boy and a wolf would live forever, unbroken, untamed, and eternal.